Hello, my name is Leonard Jason, and I am a professor of clinical and community psychology at DePaul University in Chicago. And I am delighted to be able to talk to you at this Canary Initiative. And the canary is something that's very symbolic because we all are, in a sense, canaries in a mine. And we're basically trying to stay alive. And when the canary dies in the mine, that means there's gas. And we're all being subjected to all types of chemicals and gases. Most people are able to live with these types of exposures, but there are some people who are very sick with multiple chemical sensitivities, or myalgic encephalomyelitis, or long COVID, or many other illnesses, where they need to be in safe housing. And truthfully, everyone needs to have safe housing, but in particular, those who are at most risk and those who are suffering from this exposure. So I have, for decades, been doing basic research on people who have these chronic conditions that are not well explained, and they're often due to post-viral illnesses or chemical exposure. And what's so important is for us to, as a society, find ways that these individuals can be safe, not just in terms of food, but also in terms of shelter. And that's why this Canary Initiative to develop housing for people with special exposure issues, people who are sick because of where they're living, it's so important to basically find ways to provide this type of safe housing. So I would say that in terms of these problems our world is faced today, those who have this type of chronic exposure or post-viral illness as well, these are some of the most debilitated individuals. And my research with ME/CFS has found, as well as with long COVID, that those folks who have these conditions often are more seriously impaired than just about any other chronic illness. And yet, if you look at funding that's available for research, for services, for housing, and for all the types of things we're talking about, often this is a very neglected group. So what I'm suggesting is that this type of Canary Initiative that's basically trying to make a difference is going to be so very important for the world going forward, for those individuals who basically need to have a quality place to live so that they're not being exposed to these terrible irritants. So I just want to welcome everyone at this fundraiser. I hope that you're able to provide the resources and the support that is so desperately needed by literally thousands and thousands of people. There are literally millions of individuals who have what we think of as these post-viral illnesses. This is a real challenge for medicine. It's a challenge to understand the different systems that have gone wrong based on this exposure. So what we're going to learn by having a safe place to live, and what we're going to learn by ultimate medical breakthroughs for folks who have these conditions, is going to revolutionize medicine. Because while healthcare physicians are good at potentially fixing a broken bone or doing something that's very obvious in terms of a remedy to help persons, that's systemic, complicated problems that people who have these systems that start dysfunctioning because of this exposure is something medicine and social service agencies and housing specialists have just begun to basically understand. So if you think about someone in the early 1800s and what medicine was being practiced, and you can sort of see in 200 years how things have changed so much. Well, we're at the early days of treating people who have these types of conditions of exposure to toxic chemicals, and thousands of them are in our environment. So with that being said, I want to wish you all the best. I hope that this initiative continues. And just like Johnny Appleseed, what's starting in Michigan will ultimately create the revolution that's so needed for our country. The diseases that we're talking about are actually quite a few. The one that's probably best known is what's called ME/CFS. ME standing for myalgic encephalomyelitis, CFS for chronic fatigue syndrome. So ME/CFS is an illness that's characterized by individuals who have post-exertional malaise, cognitive impairment, unrefreshing sleep, and also a variety of other conditions. They tend to be exposed to chemicals and not react well to them. So special housing for them is very important. But another group that is in the news, of course, are folks who've been exposed to SARS-CoV-2 and have not recovered. These are called long haulers or long COVID. And these are individuals who basically have very similar symptoms, fatigue being one of the significant ones, but post-exertional malaise, cognitive impairment. And these individuals also tend to have these types of reactions to the toxic chemicals that are in so many products today. But it's not just people with long COVID, and it's not just people, of course, with ME/CFS, but there's actually a whole new group of individuals who are often called multiple chemical sensitivities. And that group are individuals, of course, who feel okay, except when they're exposed to these chemicals that are so widespread. But there are many other groups that have things like Lyme, have things like fibromyalgia, widespread pain. So yes, if you think about all the different conditions that people have that involve susceptibility to the environment, where they are exposed to chemicals and things that, including things like mold, and make them sick. Yes, these individuals need to have safe housing. So there are literally millions of them. And I think that this Canary Initiative is so very important to help these individuals live a decent quality of life.